as the best entertainment team for Hollywood Bowl. A teenager has admitted at Glasgow High Court to killing 3 of his friends by dangerous driving near Dumfries. Jake Loy, 17 at the time, had just a provisional license and was driving the car on the A711 Dumfries to Dalbeatty Road in March 2022 when he crashed into another vehicle. Finley Jones, Ian Cannon and Tyler Johnston, who were all 16, died at the scene. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said that Keir Starmer would make the UK less safe. The Prime Minister said Labour would not match his pledges on defence, which includes a commitment to boost defence spending to 2.5% of national income by 2030. Labour has said it would meet the same target when conditions allow, and when asked about the remarks, he said security be his first priority. And now for African news. A group of African nations has called for a sanctions regime as talks have opened on a landmark treaty which is aimed at putting an end to biopiracy. The United Nations opened the debate on Monday the 13th of May in Geneva with a view to finalising the treaty which aims to prevent the plundering of genetic resources and traditional knowledge surrounding them. And that's the latest from Jambo Newsroom. I'm Andrew Bailey.
Established in 2006 as one of Glasgow's original mobile massage therapists, we deliver high-quality treatments with the ambition to forge permanent relations with clientele. We specialise in on-site massage, a type of treatment that has been specifically designed to complement the convenience and availability of massage at work. It is performed with the use of a specialist mobile chair, without the use of oils or the need to remove clothing. At Massage & Glow, we believe that massage should be a part of your everyday lifestyle. Regular massage not only relieves stress and tension, but also stimulates blood circulation, can help with pain management, and promotes good mental health. A must for your busy schedule. Various holistic therapies available. Contact us now on 07530 905 152 for your mobile massage therapist.
Need security? Call Alpha One Plus Limited, a strategic security resourcing platform that connects you with licensed security personnel. We cater for our clients' security needs, from manned guarding, door supervision, event security, all the way up to close personal protection. Alpha One Plus Limited, your one-stop security solution. Call now at 44-074 2526 7909 or send us an email on info@alphaoneplus.com.
Across the World Wide Web, on your mobile devices, on social media platforms. This is Jambo Radio! www.jamboradio.co.uk. We are multilingual. We are conversational in the languages you best understand. We are Jambo Radio! Jambo Radio, inspiring transformation.
Good morning. Welcome to Exploring Faith with me, your host, Inonge Siluka. I'm from Overflow Chat. I have an exciting topic today. But before we do that, if you're new, welcome. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. Exploring Faith is about talking about different conversations about Christianity, the Bible, the church, with a particular focus on topics that may not be covered as much in churches and in especially African and Caribbean churches. And so today we have a topic that I think doesn't get addressed very much, which is thinking about how we can be confident in the Bible. Can we trust the Bible? Is it trustworthy? I think it's a question that many people have. It's a question that I have had especially growing up as a young Christian. And so I think it's a topic worth tackling. And I have an amazing guest to discuss this with. She is amazing. I cannot wait to introduce her. But before I do that, I want to highlight some of the ways in which you can join in the conversation today. So you can call the studio direct. That's on 0141 530 2787. Or you can send us a WhatsApp or a voicemail. No, a voice note. It's not a voicemail. A voice note on 0745 990 6822. If you're on social media, you can send us a message on Facebook. That is Jambo Radio Scotland, where this is also streaming live, as well as on YouTube. And you can also follow us on Instagram. We are jamboradio.scotland, and on Twitter, Jambo Radio 1. And if you have any questions or contributions, you can email them as well at info@jamboradio.co.uk, or you can do that at Overflow Chat. So if you go to my website, the Christian blog, overflowchat.com, you can send an email message there and also look at other helpful content. Would love to hear from you as we discuss trusting the Bible, or how trustworthy the Bible is. And so I would love to introduce my guest, Clare Williams. So Clare, welcome to Jambo Radio.
Thank you so much, Inonge. Good to be with you.
Yeah, Clare, I'm gonna do a little blurb introduction. So it's gonna seem quite quite formal, just because I think it's helpful to have the formal context. But I will ask you to just share a little bit more about yourself as well. So I met Clare when we were doing some conversations around justice, around race during lockdown, through a ministry called Passion for Evangelism. This is a ministry that aims to equip female evangelists, so equipping women to be able to articulate the gospel and preach it in different contexts that they find themselves in. And yeah, we just got on, we've been in touch, and I think Clare has lots of helpful things to say, and we'll talk a little bit later about the different platforms you can find her on. But Clare is a founder of Real Questions. So that is a Christian apologetics organization which basically addresses questions about Christianity, like the topic we're discussing today, and particularly from the Black community. So very relevant. She has a degree in English literature and language from Oxford University. And she also completed postgraduate training in theology at Wycliffe Hall. Clare also has an MA in leadership and another master's in culture, diaspora and ethnicity at Birkbeck University of London. And she is now a PhD sociology student. And out with that, she enjoys questions of culture, truth, identity, and the gospel. So you're in for a treat. Clare, just tell us a little bit about, I mentioned apologetics there and the main ministry that you do there with Real Questions. Tell us a little bit about your background, your Christian faith, and then what got you interested in tackling apologetics topics like this, and maybe define apologetics, how you define it as well, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Inonge. It's so good to be working with you again. Yeah, it's great. To thank you. So my background is I was born in the UK. My parents are from the Caribbean, Jamaican father, St. Lucian mother, so a bit of a mix there. Grew up in church, encountered God at a relatively young age and was convinced of the claims of Christianity. But then as you get older, you have questions, right? Mm-hmm. And so I grew up reading the Bible a lot and loving the Bible, but then having questions when, you know, you go through social media and you start to doubt, do I believe this because it's true? Is it because my parents are Christian? And how can we trust this ancient text? So things like that, having my own questions about faith and understanding perhaps maybe when I was a bit younger, there's not always the forums to have the discussion we're going to be having today. Yeah. And so wanting to be part of, you know, a solution or helping others as well, but also the whole discipline of apologetics, which can get bad press and for good reason, but just as a broad definition, when we think about 1 Peter chapter 3, there's and verse 15, it says, always be ready to give an answer, to give an apologia, a reason for your faith, but do it with gentleness and respect. So being able to give a reasoned defense for what it is you believe and why you believe it. And there's different ways you can do that, drawing upon philosophy, drawing upon science, drawing upon history, extra biblical sources and data, mathematics, beauty. So the whole world becomes data for whether or not God exists. And for different people and the questions that they have, some of that data is going to ring more true and point more clearly to God's existence and the truth and beauty of the Christian message.
That is a helpful definition. I've not heard that, like drawing from, just different things that God has created, and because we are also different things will engage us more than others. And so I love just seeing that that's how broad apologetics is. And so if you're a science person, absolutely love that for you. Do that and explain things in a way that's helpful to God's glory. But some people are more philosophically minded. Some people are artistic. And so I think, really, really, really helpful definition there. Just to our listeners, this is a big topic. You might have questions or you might have contributions that you might want to make. So just a reminder, you can share and contribute to the conversation. Do you have any questions about the Bible, yourself in particular? Are there things that you want us to tackle in this conversation? Let us know. You can drop a comment if you're listening on YouTube or on Facebook Live, or you can drop a WhatsApp message or voice note on 0745 990 6822. That is 0745 990 6822. If you're feeling bold, you can call the studio and join the conversation. Our number is 0141 530 2787. So just back to our guest, Clare. I want us to start thinking about some of the reasons. So people have loads of questions about the Bible. And Clare, you mentioned some of the questions you had. I've had my own questions, especially moving from a very religious country in Zambia to Scotland. Growing up as a teenager, I had loads of questions. But what do you think at the moment are some of the reasons people might distrust the Bible? Because I guess that's where the questions might lead. Like, can I really trust this thing? Like, everybody is preaching from the Bible, we're teaching from the Bible, we're taking lessons about life and who Jesus is from the Bible, but is it trustworthy? What do you think are some of the reasons that people would say, actually, I don't trust the Bible because of X?
So I think to take it more broadly, I think there's been a movement with culture and the questions we have about religion in general, and in particular Christianity, and therefore the Bible. So I think in the past, and lots of Christian apologists will say this sort of thing, that people are asking about questions of truth. Is Christianity true? Like, does God exist? Kind of thing. Is what's recorded in the Bible true? Is it historical? Is it factual? Then questions have now moved to, is it relevant? So you might be able to make a case for, let's say, the resurrection of Jesus. Okay, but what's that got to do with me? So what? I'm living my life, But now we're in a place where the questions are, is Christianity, is the Bible harmful? Okay, so we've gone from truth, we've moved to relevance, and now a place of harm. That the ideas, what's espoused in the Bible, are actually going to be harmful to us. And so I think a lot of the questions we see today are around questions of harm. Is it good for me? Is it beautiful? Is it for my flourishing? Those kind of questions. And they come in different forms, but I think those are like the bigger categories as to where the questions have moved to in culture.
Yeah. What do you think has brought us to that place? That's an interesting shift. And I've definitely seen that shift from, I think I sometimes in my head, I'm like, I just left uni like 3 years ago, but it's 9 years ago. So from when I was in first year of university, would have been like 14 years ago. And the questions that would have been asked would have been around, is this true? Is this reliable? And so when I was, wrestling with my faith, I was looking at, can we trust the Gospels? Does science, and religion go together? I was looking at those sorts of questions in first year of uni. By my last year of uni, it was, is this actually helpful for us? So that more questions about the Bible were coming up a lot more. And like you said, a bit of a shift in, yes, this might be true, but is it good? Is it beautiful? Like you said, is this going to help me flourish? What do you think has brought about that shift in like just what you've observed?
I think generally there is a greater sense of justice consciousness in our culture. Lots of institutions schools, healthcare, churches, governments are being held to higher standards of integrity and safeguarding, and these are actually good things. And so then if the Bible, the text which Christians, build their faith on, seems to be espousing ideas that are anti-justice, then we're going to need to interrogate that. I also think that COVID had a massive impact on this. I think, dealing with, global suffering in the face of your belief that you believe in a good God has also made people question. And I don't think there's anything wrong with questions. I don't think God is afraid of our questions at all. And in fact invites them. So COVID, cost of living crisis, war in Ukraine, what we're seeing right now in Gaza, all of these big global things have an impact at the personal level and how we process things. And it creates these questions of, look, I don't want to be affiliated, I don't want to be associated with anything that is harmful, anything that is not good for human flourishing. So if the Bible turns out to be that too, then I'm gonna take a step back from that as well. So I think global things then have a very local and personal impact, because that's who we are. We're humans. We're made in the image of God, and we're in the culture. We can't escape it. But I do think still, even with all these questions, there is something good. There is good and truth and beauty in the message of the Bible and what God has to say.
What do you think that would be? So if somebody was saying, actually, I don't do religion, and they might, use a more broader framework there. I don't do religion. I think religion has done more harm than good to people when you look at history, actually. And, they might point to, questions about, is the Bible good for women? Is it good for Black people? If you are talking to someone who has those questions and thinks of the Bible in that way, where would you take them? Like, what would be your starting point to get them to the place where you are and where I am, where we're actually saying, no, this is amazing, this is good, this is the best news ever. We want to answer people's questions and we want to acknowledge where they're coming from. So where would you start and where would you take them through those questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think let's say women, okay? I think and that's a big question now on university campuses when I'm doing sort of events for Christian unions. Is Christianity good news for women? Is a huge question now, and rightly so. I think that sometimes, particularly when we look at the Bible, we might see, people might say, oh, it's full of patriarchy and women aren't treated well, etc., etc. And then we see, scandals upon scandals in churches today, and it's like a really bleak picture. What I see when I'm reading the Bible and seeing, even some horrific instances of women being treated terribly, is that the God of the Bible is not sanitizing that, is not erasing it and pretending it doesn't happen. The Bible is speaking very clearly about the depths of where we can go as a people when we're so far from God, so far from his holiness, so far from his vision for our existence and our living, that this is what happens. And
he doesn't sugarcoat it. It's like, this is how it actually is. Like, this is the reality.
Exactly. And then into that messy story, we get the solution. We get to see the person of Jesus, and we get to see how he treated women. And I don't think sometimes when we talk about the question of women and treatment in the Bible, etc., people run to but Jesus, woman at the well, John 4, and that's a great, don't get me started, I could preach about John 4 all day. But actually when you look at the Old Testament, you can see how women are esteemed and valued by the God of the Bible. You think about Hagar, you think about the daughters of Zelophehad given property, you think about the fact that there are stories about women and their fertility, like Hannah. So in this ancient text, and in ancient texts generally speak of empire, speak about male domains, speak about big picture things. The Bible zooms in onto individual people's lives and messed up families and broken relationships, because God cares deeply about that. So I'm thinking, to me, these sorts of things speak of the character of God and who he is, of a relational God, not a God who is so transcendent and far that he is aloof from us, but actually is deeply concerned and is intimately and imminently close to us in our daily existence. And so those sorts of things for me bring actually out beauty in the Bible, and it tells me something about the heart of the God of the Bible too.
Yeah. I think helpful points there, Claire, just about understanding. I think sometimes we don't realize how radical the Bible is in challenging injustices, in challenging, cultural norms of the day that would, yes, harmful towards women, towards children, and how the God of the Bible, challenges those things within those cultures. And so, yeah, helpful just bringing the context. Like, by the way, you might read this and think that's not a big deal with modern eyes. But if we read the Bible with ancient eyes, we will see, whoa, like, women are, speaking, and they're celebrated. And yeah, you know, that just one example of women, but you can look at other topics about outcasts and outsiders, and how the Bible tells us their stories, showing us that they matter in God's story, and just shows us the kind of God we believe in, and the people that he uses. I just wanted to sort of come back to, I think, some of the maybe truth or reliability related questions. I think this is something that comes up sometimes with modern, within movements in modern, what do you call this? In Black Christianity, I think there's a question about the Bible being a product of just human intervention. It's been changed so many times, and so actually the Bible that you have, you can't be trusted because that many people have changed it. It's gone through that many translations. Therefore, who's to say like what we have is what was originally there? So just another question there. How would you talk someone through that question? And I know it's quite a big, you could have a whole hour on that. Yeah, with overview and maybe some resources actually, Claire, as well. We'll talk about resources at the end, but
So I think the fact that we're having this conversation and that we know that this one question about is the Bible reliable in terms of it's being changed, it could last 2-hour discussion. That is showing that the Christian faith is critical. There's a critical thinking aspect to being a Christian. You need to talk these things out. There's a robust mental engagement in this. It's not just blind faith. So I think this is all good stuff. With regard to has the Bible been changed, that kind of objection, the Bible is an ancient text subject, like any other ancient text, to textual criticism, an academic discipline where manuscript copies of the Bible are kind of like reviewed by academics to see, what's the most reliable in terms of the earliest to the events being recorded. Have there been spelling changes and errors, copyists, scribal insertions, those sorts of things. So as a text, when you take the Bible, let's say the New Testament, and in particular the biographies of Jesus, the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when they are subjected to textual criticism, they do really, really well, especially when compared to other ancient texts like Tacitus' Annals or just other ancient texts. Okay, and with any ancient text, you don't get originals. Okay, we don't have the originals of the New Testament, for instance. We don't have that. And that is the benchmark for any ancient text that tells us anything about the past and particularly the Greco-Roman world. And so in the world of textual criticism, there is lots of information about the integrity, the textual integrity. So in terms of the transmission from the time the events were recorded until now, which shows by and large, these events haven't been radically changed. And I feel that there's also a sense of it being sensational. The Bible's been changed and we want to get this extra knowledge from texts outside the Bible, the Apocrypha and the Book of Enoch. I get a lot of conversations with Black men who the Book of Enoch, and they want to read this esoteric knowledge, this stuff out there. When we read the Bible, say Mark 16, it's clear in our Bible that the last few verses there were added later, probably by some scribe. So this idea that there's this underground conspiracy to conceal the true scriptures for us, it's not quite doing that. It's there. The same is true for John 8, where we get the description of the woman who was caught in adultery. and Jesus writes on the ground, and her people who are about to stone her, they walk away. That also, in our Bibles, it will tell us this is a later insertion. Not all the earliest manuscripts have it, and so it's saying it. But does it sound like Jesus? In a lot of ways, it does, and I believe it's probably an accurate description of an event that happened in Jesus' ministry. But this idea that this is being hidden, it's there. It's there in plain sight. So I would say, if you want to investigate whether or not we can trust the Bible, a really good place to start is a nice short book by Peter J. Williams. He's principal of Tyndale House, and it's called Can We Trust the Gospels? And so he looks at different ways we can do this in terms of the dating of the Gospels, in terms of just the sheer number of manuscripts that we have. Not that number means what's written there is true, but these are different types of tests in terms of the details. When we start to look at how precisely the names of individuals are recorded in the New Testament accounts, that the precision is giving us these people clearly lived and knew and were getting eyewitness testimony to write their accounts. This isn't some fabrication later on, by the Roman Empire to control people. So even if you don't believe the supernatural claims, you don't believe the theological claims of the Bible, as an historical text, the New Testament, and particularly, as I'm saying, the biographies of Jesus, stand up pretty well in textual criticism. And I think from there, that's when we have the wider conversations about, who was Jesus, all those sorts of things. So I think there is a bit of sensationalism about this to discredit the Bible, but I think we need to ground that in some serious scholarship. So do check out Can We Trust the Gospels by Peter J. Williams. If you want to go a bit more technical, it's a bit longer book, Testimonies to the Truth by Lydia McGrew. She's also making some great observations there, and they appeal to sort of things like archaeology, etc. But anyway, I can talk about this forever. I'm going to stop.
No, super helpful stuff. Just about just how much the Bible stands up to scrutiny if we put it to the same test as we would other ancient texts. And so just starting there, recommend those two resources. I'll put them in the notes on Overflow Chat website and the notes on this particular episode. But we are going to take a short music break. I'm going to play you a song by Christopher Martin, the reggae cover of Goodness of God.
Yes, man, yes, he is good. Yeah, and just want to thank you so much for doing it, yeah?
Love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my day I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so good. Yes, every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. You know I love your voice, for you have led me through the fire in darkest nights. You are close like no other. You know I've known you as a father. You know I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God.
can't hear you. I can't hear you.
That people might have questions about the Bible, and a little bit about how we've moved in society from thinking about the reliability of the Bible, whether it's true, and to thinking about whether it's actually something that causes harm. And so I think, just back to the harm question, I think sometimes Black Christians, especially, even Christians in diaspora, just as Black Christians, wherever we are in the world, we sometimes have a hard time trusting the Bible for very specific reasons relating to our experiences as Black people. And so, Claire, I want us to think about this question of oppression, and some of the reasons that Black Christians in particular might have a hard time trusting the Bible. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts or observations from that?
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons I got into this and then the discipline of apologetics, and it is this question that a lot of, I have it myself, okay, Black Christians, Black skeptics, Black seekers have about the Bible and its trustworthiness, not just in terms of it technically, like we were talking about manuscripts, historical evidence, etc., but more to do with it being a tool of oppression, because we know the Bible and Christianity was weaponized in the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah,
that is a fact of history. All right, and people try, oh, it happened a long time ago. You don't understand how deeply this goes, how deeply it cuts for, like you say, the Black diaspora, the Black community. And so the objection is, if the Bible was used to oppress and coerce Black people, then surely it's not good for us. Why would we worship the God of our oppressor? Yeah. Why would we comply with the text that was used to enable our oppression? And so there are scriptures in the Bible that talk about slavery. Okay, does it talk about transatlantic slavery? I think that's a separate argument. But what do you do? What do you do when you're a Pentecostal reading Ephesians 6 about spiritual warfare? But before you get to the description of the armor of God, you've got to read verses from verse 1, which talks about slaves and their masters. What do you do with that? And so this is the elephant in the room. This is the specter of slavery, if you will, that hangs over the experience of Black Christians. And there's a great theologian called Esau Macaulay, and he says, you know, theology for our white brothers and sisters often begins with sanctification or justification, that kind of really reformed perspective, whereas theology for a lot of Black people begins with theodicy. How do I make sense of my suffering and the idea of a good God? It begins with those questions. It's a completely different starting point. And so let's these are the reasons. So you know, I think the transatlantic slavery and then all the colonialism and all that kind of stuff, it feeds into why there is a particular difference of answering this question about the Bible being used as a tool of oppression.
Yeah. And just as you're saying there, Claire, I don't think the question has been answered very well, because people then try to diminish the seriousness of what we're talking about. So like you said, for slavery, they'll be like, oh, well, it happened a long time ago. You know, bad people did bad things. Sin happens. And therefore, you know, let's move on from this conversation. Not understanding the really, really deep-rooted consequences of that. Like, we're still experiencing that today. And not just that, even if it happened a long time ago, like, evil doesn't stop being evil just because time has passed. And we don't say that about other atrocities. We don't say that about other horrible things that have happened. Oh, well, they happened in the past, so let's all just move on. And so that kind of like diminishing, and even like colonialism, for example, which was used you know, I come from Zambia, and we celebrate Independence Day in October every year. And, you know, sometimes we can, you know, make it sound happy and stuff, and like, oh, we're celebrating and we've got our flag. But it just struck me, most African countries have red on their flag, and the red stands for the blood that was shed in the fight for independence. And you actually think about it, you're like, oh my goodness, people died trying to be liberated from this oppression. And Christians might look at that and go, well, but look how the good that came from it. And I think there's a part where we almost don't trust that Jesus can handle truth. Like, we think we have to make stuff look better or seem better than it is to somehow
explain it away.
And Jesus is truth. Like, you think he's gonna be like, oh, I didn't see that, I'm just gonna pretend, you know what I mean? Like, I think our grasp of Jesus' truth and his light, he shines light in the darkness. And so I think a helpful starting point would be, just that acknowledgement. Deal with the elephant in the room, who is trying to make sense of those experiences, and can I trust in this God and in this Bible, which has been used as a tool of oppression? Where do you go with that question?
Inonge, you cut out for a minute, so I think I lost you. Can you just, in a nutshell, repeat it? Full question, sorry.
The question. Yeah. Sorry. So where would you go if somebody had this question about, I'm trying to make sense of my Christian faith or Christianity. Can I actually be a Christian, or can I trust in this Bible, which has been used to oppress others? Where would you sort of take someone with those questions? And take them through a journey. Yeah. I think I just mentioned the fact that it's usually more than one conversation. It's not like you give people an answer and then ta-da, off you go. Like, it's the kind of ongoing wrestling. What kind of things would you point to?
Absolutely. And I think a couple of things. The first thing is to say that I think, along with the very valid objection or question that the Bible's been used as a tool of oppression with regards particularly to slavery, the enslavement of Black people, there also comes this idea that Black people who became Christians on plantations only did so because of their religion was forced into them at the end of a whip, the lash of a whip. And that isn't quite the case. It also diminishes, I'll come back to that, it also diminishes the fact that Christianity was in the continent of Africa prior to slavery as well. So you see that in the work of like Shunuta of Atripe, an Egyptian Christian scholar. You see that in like the Ethiopian church, Michael the Deacon, even having conversations with Martin Luther, and his whole idea of the Reformation. So this idea that Black people only encountered Christianity, and yes, there is a point to make about Christianity not arriving, let's say, in West Africa, although there are some arguments that I can go into a bit later, or point you to some resources. That is not the only time people of colour have encountered the Christian faith, and actually Christianity is not a Western religion at all. Just geographically, that's not the case. But then going back to this idea of the Bible being used to oppress and enslave, and the only way Black people found about Christianity was because of slavery. When you actually read the accounts, the narratives of formerly enslaved Black people, many of whom wanted to become Christians, and if you read their accounts, they were stopped. Their masters and mistresses, their enslavers, stopped them. So I read a lot of Mary Prince's narrative for my PhD, and she talks about how she wanted to go to church, she wanted to but she couldn't tell her enslaver because the enslaver would stop them. Why? Because Christianity is so weaponized to align with being white and being free, that it was prohibited by the plantocracy, for Black people to become Christians. How could the Black, savage become a Christian? But when you read these narratives, these people have clearly encountered Jesus. They've read the scriptures for themselves. They've taught themselves to read, as was the case with Frederick Douglass, and they see something compelling about the person of Jesus and the Christian faith, and they can make the distinction between the butchered, doctored version of Christianity that was fed to them. And this isn't just from the accounts of the enslaved. There's a lady called Catherine Gerbner. She's written a book called Christian Slavery, which unpacks a lot of this. And another resource, I was going to save it to the end, but I'll say it now, is the Unspoken documentary. If you just go onto Google, write Unspoken documentary, you can find it on Amazon Prime, you can rent it or you can buy it. It literally deals with what we're talking about today and more, and looks at this notion of, Black people only became Christians because of slavery. When you actually read the accounts of your ancestors, of our ancestors, if you read their accounts, the picture is very different.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's not do the work of the same erasing version of Christianity by not acknowledging these accounts. Some people might say, oh, they wrote it like that because, of Stockholm syndrome, or they respectability, they had to write like that for their voices to be heard. I don't think you can land there, one, because it's very patronizing and it doesn't give them the same critical thinking skills that they clearly have.
Mm-hmm.
When you read their accounts, you can hear the wrestle. You can hear that they clearly understand something has gone wrong here with this aberration of slavery and what it did in weaponizing Christianity. So these are all things they're hard to wrestle with. And trust me, when I'm reading narratives of the formerly enslaved, I'm enraged. It's brutal. But there is this incredible strong faith, again, which Esau Macaulay describes, talks about the Black church as a miracle. The fact that it exists is miraculous. The fact that you and I as Black women are sitting here having this conversation, convinced of who Jesus is a miracle. Why? Because we've encountered Jesus. Despite how the message of Christianity has been massively used and distorted, and there's lots of conversations to be had about that.
Thanks, Claire. That's very helpful. I will definitely have Claire put all these resources together for you. And we could have this conversation for hours, and I think it's definitely worth reading these narratives. Just a point that you raised there about, if we just go with this narrative of, Christianity is a white man's religion, we're actually doing the same thing that these oppressors did and just decentering Black people and erasing their own experiences and their contributions to the Christian faith. I've been, I think, in majority white spaces, and most of my theology training has been there, and I didn't even realize until like a few years ago just how much Africans had contributed to theology. Like Athanasius, who wrote about the incarnation. If anybody goes to seminary training, they'll be given Athanasius to read because it talks about all the ways in which Jesus is God. And if you see pictures of him, he's African, but like he looks like Santa. And so actually, just going with the narrative of it's all white people, whatever, it's partly because of white supremacy and all of that has centered only the white person's experience, or white theologians, that we don't even realize this other side. There's a whole realm of people who have written, who have sung, who have spoken, and their narratives are not in our text, they're not in our seminaries, they're not front and center. And that is probably a contributing factor of why we think, this has nothing to say to Black people. And so I'm really encouraged to see people like yourselves and, other ministries centering these voices again. And we're learning from them and their experiences, and they're wrestling, and, we lament with them, we learn from them, we grow. And I think it's beautiful because it adds this other whole diverse voice to enrich our experience of Christianity, and that's what it does. It adds to what we know, and I'm certainly enjoying the learning process. Claire, just another kind of more personal question, maybe, and you've touched on it a little bit. But what is it that got you to a place where you yourself came to be confident about the Bible's reliability, about the Bible's truth, about the Bible's goodness and richness? And how do you think that has then shaped your walk with Jesus?
I think I'll just begin with a caveat to say I still think I'm going to have questions. Yeah. I think it's a process of walking out your faith and wrestling with maybe not the questions I had in the past, but new ones that might emerge.
Yeah.
But I do believe I trust ultimately in the character, the goodness of God's character. Yeah, to be able to sit with me in my wrestle with Him. Yeah, but I think for me, in terms of trusting the Bible, seeing it as a reliable text, I kind of did this process of breaking up into three things. So, can I trust the text of the Bible? So just manuscripts in terms of its transmission over time, as it, like we discussed, radically been changed, those sorts of things. So the text, and I think I'm pretty secure in the scholarship that is out there about what the text of the Bible is doing. Then there's the history, okay, which is just because something's written down doesn't mean what it says is factual or happened. So that's the question of history. Did these events happen? The historicity of the Bible. And I think there's lots of good evidence out there to attest to the person of Jesus outside of the Bible, that he was a real figure. That's another big question. Jesus didn't exist. We see that again bubbling around in Black communities. He's an invention. Jesus didn't exist, and that just doesn't stand up to historical scrutiny. Okay. Another really good book that looks at some of the wider evidence for why we might trust the Bible as telling us truth about history in the past is it's quite a big book, but it's called Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and it's by Sean and Josh McDowell. So coming to terms with, okay, given the history that the Bible is attesting, there's lots to it that I think is true. Okay, so let's just say Hezekiah's tunnel, those archaeological finds, Sennacherib's prism, the Pilate stone, these are all attesting or pointing to the events that the Bible is talking about. So text, history, and then this other question, you could say theology, or the existential claims of the Bible. What story is the Bible telling us?
Yeah.
And I think what we discussed before about when we see violence, when we see horrors and tragedies in the Bible, the fact that it's not being hidden, but this is what it means to be human. I think the story of the Bible is saying, yeah, we've messed up. Something is, even if you're not a Christian, if you're not a believer, we know intuitively that there's something not quite right with the world. Yeah, just scroll through the news and I think you'll come to that conclusion. Yes, there is beauty and enjoyment in the world, but there's something not quite right. And I think the Bible affirms that. Yeah, the story, the whole narrative arc from Genesis to Revelation affirms that there is something wrong. There is beauty, but there is something not quite right. And then doesn't just affirm that, actually says, here is the solution. And that is most expressly in the person of Jesus. And so taken together, text, history, theology / existential claims, I have confidence in the Bible and what it tells me about the world and how I ought to live as well. So that's kind of been my journey.
Yeah, I'm so glad you started with that caveat, because I think in some circles, if you have questions, it makes you a bad Christian, or it means you're not spiritually mature, you're not to be trusted. And actually, the life of faith is that constant, like, Lord, what? Just different questions, probably. Like you, Claire, I had different questions at 19 than I have now. And people always ask me this, especially with my work with Restored Hope Zambia, and I guess just seeing the evil that Christians or professing Christians do brings a whole different set of questions, and where do you take them? And I can totally relate to that, actually. The place of lament, I think I found myself lamenting more these days, so my questions are less intellectual and they're more those existential, like the why, like, what is this? How do I make sense of this? And I know the right theological answers, but it's hard. And so actually I find myself clinging to Jesus more and more, because actually it's only trusting in his character, in who he is, that helps me make sense of everything and helps keep me going. And so even if you still have questions and you're listening to this and you're like, you don't get this part, or you don't get this part, the one person you can actually trust with those questions and trust with the unanswered questions, probably will never have all our questions fully answered in this life. I can truly trust Jesus. He is trustworthy. He is good. He is kind. He is patient and wants to walk with you. And I think just to encourage somebody who might be listening and still have questions, that's okay. That's okay. Take them to Jesus. He can handle it. And just to wrap up then, with some resource, you've mentioned quite a few resources, but maybe just talk a little bit about some of the questions that you talk about on your podcast. So you've got a podcast, Real Questions with Clare, that everybody listening to this should absolutely go and listen to and subscribe to, and also follow Clare on Instagram. The handle is Real Questions UK, because she talks about all of this chat and other chat, different questions about the Bible, about Christianity, current events and things that people are saying. So, she makes it relevant to conversations that are happening on social media, in pop culture. And so it's a good resource, not just for yourself if you've got these questions, but to point other people to, longer podcasts, shorter 1-minute clips, whatever it may be. So Clare, any other resources that you would recommend or want to share just before we wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much for the shout outs there for the podcast and my social media handles, Real Questions UK. Please do have a listen. Episode 7 should be coming out later today. Episode 8, sorry. Definitely, please watch the Unspoken documentary by the Jude Free Project. I cannot emphasize that enough. All right. Then fish around on their website, Jude 3 Project, for just amazing resources, podcasts, video clips, all sorts, articles. Another book I would recommend is The Whitewashing of Christianity by Jerome Gay Jr. The Whitewashing of Christianity by Jerome Gay Jr., where he, puts a lot more detail into all the things we've been talking about today, that maybe what we've seen is not that Christianity is a white man's religion, because we know geographically and just the person of Jesus wasn't white, okay? What we have seen perhaps is this whitewashing of Christianity through what? Colonialism, white supremacy, all those things we've discussed. And I think it's an excellent book. So The Unspoken documentary by the Jude 3 Project, okay? And The Whitewashing of Christianity by Jerome Gay Jr. And obviously, please check out the podcast, Real Questions with Clare, and my website, realquestions.co.uk.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Clare. And this episode has been recorded. You can find it on Facebook and YouTube later, and I will also upload it at some point in the next week to overflowchat.com. Clare, thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest. Really appreciate you and your ministry. We're gonna wrap up there. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I'm gonna leave you with not Goodness of God, we listened to that earlier. Altar by Harvey and Forrest Frank. Bye.